So how long does a project like this, which does include an incredible amount of world building, in fact, you've got a glossary in the back of just all the terms that you're keeping track of for the reader. How long does a project like this take you to write?
It's hard to say because in some ways, a lot of those little pieces that I was putting together in my imagination that was probably a couple of years. I would say at least 2 years of just starting with that, doing some of that world building and I would make notes. I have notebooks and documents on my computer where when I would think of new ideas, I would kind of add them into the mix and refine what the rules of the world were supposed to be, and then eventually settling in on the character and the plot and where I want the story to go. I am one who I do outline, but it's more of, to me, it feels that the process of creating a story is just building it in my imagination and then starting to give it structure. You can, as you well know, Rob, it's hard to hold all those ideas for the story in your head. And so I do a lot of the organizing, the plotting, I guess, in advance is a way of just trying to organize the different pieces that I'm thinking about for the story. And I consider that almost a first draft of building the outline for the story that I want to tell, and leaving a lot of room and a lot of possibilities as I start into writing the actual first draft in novel form, in prose form, as with giving that a lot of option to be flexible, to change and adapt as I go along. So I'd say once I started actually writing the first draft of the story, I spent a year and a half, I think, on that book. I'm not the fastest writer in the world. So, and I would say that's pretty typical for my books. The 9-Pound Hammer, I spent 3.5 years getting that one together. Of course, that was my first novel that really earned. I mean, I'd written some bad novels in the past that I hope will never see the light of day, but that was the first one that felt like my skills were coming together on it. So, so it's often more than a year of working on a story of a draft before I even turn my attention to revisions and sharing it with others for feedback.
So how detailed an outline are we talking about? How long is that usually, and how much is in there?
It varies from book to book. I feel like every time I start a new book, it's like I forget what I did last time. It's like, how do you create a story? I forgot what I did before. So each one is a little bit different. I'm trying to think of, lately I've been, my outlines have been almost like long synopsis of the story, where I'll just kind of write it out. But I feel like the Pinocchio story was one that I organized at that time a little bit more on the big turning points for the story. Actually, I know that's how it was because I was using the original framework. I knew that I wanted, that my vision for this story was that I wanted to follow in general the traditional Pinocchio story. The, kind of the, he and, meeting Geppetto at that beginning, of dealing with the talking cricket, the fox and the cat, the kind of marionette theater part, which in mine as that kind of battle theater in Siena.
Huge improvement, by the way.
What's that? Yeah, huge improvement. Yeah, it's a lot better. So, which was, and part of what was fun with some of those was letting the original story inspire and guide what I wanted to do, but just putting my own twist onto it. If we asked 100 different people to rewrite Pinocchio, they're going to all write it in a different way because that toy box of their imagination, all those things that they like to play with, is going to be different, different pieces. And for me, the part of what helped to build the world was, for example, in the original Pinocchio, you have the marionette theater that Pinocchio kind of gets trapped in there, and it's led by my Italian is off now, but it's like Mangiafuoco or something like that, which is like the fire eater, was that character's name. And then just thinking, well, hold it, what is who's going to run this theater? And then the fire eater thing led to this idea that it would be a kind of fire elemental being that runs the theater, who becomes that, that figure of in the book. So in other words, a lot of what guided the original story and building the outline were those main characters from the original, the turning points, and thinking of how I wanted to do maybe something a little bit different thematically with those, and the way the story arced to Pinocchio coming to be aware of what it is to be alive in the world, to feel love and friendship. And
so by the time you get to book 2, do you feel a little bit more free that you've done the service to the original Pinocchio, and now you can kind of, it's Bemis time, baby. You can do whatever you want, right?
Yeah, that was what was fun. And that's what made writing the second book so different, was because there was no source material. There was no kind of original story that I, for better or worse, had to follow. And so, yeah, it was just kind of imagining, where do I want my heroes to go next? What sort of adventures do I want them to have? And for it to be something that allows Pinocchio to continue to grow and evolve as a character. That could be one of the challenges in writing a series in general, is where do you take your character next? I mean, you can always just write a sequel where more stuff happens, but that stuff needs to be meaningful to the character's evolution, to the way that they are, like we all are, evolving and learning and growing. So.
It's just hoping by killing one of the beloved main characters, and now the book is about dealing with this loss. There you go.
Right. Yeah, that'll do it.
At what point did you know that Disney Hyperion was gonna pick this up? I'm assuming well after it was written, right?
Yeah. When I was writing the book, it was not something that was necessarily intended for Disney. So that worked out really nicely. Because at this point, the Pinocchio is in the public domain, just like Peter Pan or Alice in Wonderland. Anyone can write a Pinocchio story at this point, and Disney didn't own it. I mean, because it wasn't like working with, I couldn't have written a Frozen, book with that kind of thing, because that's intellectual property that definitely belongs to Disney. And so it was a book that got shopped to a lot of different publishers, and just happened that Disney was the one that came in with the best offer and the most excitement, and was a fun place for it to land, considering that they already had the Pinocchio IP from the movie already.
Yeah, so. I wondered, was there ever any pressure to be like, hey, can we just put a little bit more of our stuff in there?
No, because the film division and the publishing division just are so separate from one another. From what I gather, it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of interaction or communication between the two, except that often when Disney Hyperion gets a book, there is always that thought that could this be something that could be developed across multiple platforms? Could this book become a movie or a TV show or something else? And unfortunately, which I didn't really think through at the time, but was that Disney's already been they've had this game plan of doing a lot of live action remakes. And so there was already that plan in place of doing the live action remake, which meant that The Wooden Prince was not going to be a movie version that Disney was going to put out, unfortunately. So.
Oh, are they doing a live action Pinocchio?
They are. Yeah.
Attention, Disney! Don't do that. We've seen that movie. Do The Wooden Prince.
Do The Wooden Prince. Yes. Let's tell them. Let's rally the troops, and it might not be too late.
I didn't see The Lion King. I listened to the soundtrack. I was very excited for a new Hans Zimmer score. But I've seen that movie. It looks shot for shot. But you bring out Pinocchio, and maybe you even get Jonathan Taylor Thomas to reprise his role. Yes. I think he did a live action Pinocchio at one point. I'm not coming. But if you make a Wooden Prince, I'll see you opening night. I'll be there.
Yeah, all right. Thank you.
And now that you're part of the Disney family, so to speak, Does that allow you to use their IP? Can you do Avengers versus Star Wars? Can that be your next book?
Oh no, there hasn't been any discussion on that. So yeah, there's plenty of other people clamoring for those projects, and I'm happy to have them as a reader. But I'll admit that after doing the Wooden Prince, kind of dealing with an existing storyline, I was ready just to for some of the next projects to work on something that was purely my own, that was not something that was a retelling or a reimagining of anything else. And so, yeah, let the Star Wars novels go to somebody else who's an even bigger fan than I am. So.
When we chatted with Daniel Jose Older, he talked about he wrote a book to tie him to the Solo movie.
Nice.
He went to Lucasfilm, and he had to sit there with the screenplay with a guard sitting across from him, watching him read it carefully. But that sounds both amazing, but also a little bit limiting.
Yeah.
Because if you want to kill Lando halfway through, you can't
do it. You can't do it.
That must be a satisfying twist.
Right. Right.